I see often happen for traders is that they will come into the market with unmet needs and attempt to get those needs met in their trading. Yes, one has to make a living, but one can't you can't earn your worth. It's a birthright. Have you been with your relationship to money? What is your temperature set point? Because if you haven't reconciled with that, you are going to, if you start to make quote unquote too much money, you will suddenly find yourself having losses that are inexplicable. Our relationship to money gets imprinted upon us based on what our parents' relationship to money was.
In this podcast episode, we had the pleasure of speaking with Kim Ann Curtin, also known as the Wall Street Coach. Kim is a renowned performance coach, speaker, and author who works with professional traders, hedge fund managers, and financial executives to elevate their performance through self-awareness and emotional mastery. As the author of Transforming Wall Street and a trusted advisor to some of the most successful names in finance, Kim brings a unique perspective that blends trading psychology, leadership development, and conscious capitalism. Her work goes far beyond charts and trading strategies. She helps traders confront their inner game and build a more authentic, sustainable approach to success. We had a lot of fun talking with her, and in this powerful conversation, we dive into topics like emotional resilience, identity in trading, handling pressure, and building confidence from within. Kim shares both deep psychological insights and practical tools to help traders of all levels perform at their best.
Hello, everyone. We are here with Kim Ann Curtin, the Wall Street Coach. Hello, Kim. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Aloha to you both. Thank you for having me on.
Hello.
Yes.
And
Okay.
I'm also here with Rolf, my co-founder from Edgewonk.
Hello, Kim. Good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. We got all
right.
parts of the globe represented tonight.
That's the
Yes,
idea.
for people that don't know, it's always a bit complicated for us. I'm in Hong Kong, Rolf is in Germany. A lot of our guests are in the US. Kim is in Hawaii. So, but we make it work.
We did. We did.
So, Kim, let's get right into it. Please tell us a bit about your career, how you got to working with traders, and why did you move from Wall Street to Hawaii?
Well, it's a long story that I'll try to make very short, but I started to work in finance probably 30 years ago now, 29 years ago, all thanks to Jim Rogers' book, Investment Biker. I worked for a bookstore at the time. I had the business section. And I think I just loved the idea of, biking on a motorcycle across the world. And I thought that was a fascinating story. But that book kind of turns me on to how, Rogers talks about how nobody was really investing in Asia at the time. And yet when he drove through that country on his motorcycle, he saw opportunity that the majority of people weren't seeing. And so I think it just turns me on to how finance was, yes, the place to make money, but also it just seems like, wow, how cool to be ahead of the curve so far like that as he was. So I did start to work in finance, and I, at the end, was at one of the largest hedge funds in the world. I was doing quite well financially, and I liked a lot of the strategic aspect of my role. But Joe Campbell had influenced me early about finding your bliss. And I didn't feel that was my bliss. But I wound up hiring an executive coach and had a transformative experience and really felt that coaching was the bliss, was what I was being called to do. So initially, when I was coaching mostly C-suite level executives. And I did coach some institutional traders because, I was working in hedge funds and, private equity and all different firms. But about 6 years ago, I always had some individual day traders, but most were institutional traders just because that was where my connections were. And I was always getting referrals. I've been a coach 18 years now, 19 years. So, But 6 years ago, give or take, I got hired to be a co-host and producer for a retail day trading podcast that was very popular. And then before I knew it, I was getting primarily day traders. And, I think I see day traders, they're very entrepreneurial. I've been an entrepreneur 20 years now. You eat what you kill and it's all on you. So the pressure, I think I just started to have such deep respect for those who took this on because it's going to ask everything of everybody who trades. And of course, Jack Schwager's books, The Market Wizards. I came to Hawaii just to write my book, Transforming Wall Street. And that had been inspired too by how Jack had, featured traders and how their journeys unfolded. I wanted to feature the good men and women of Wall Street because I knew so many, I had worked with so many. So I wanted to kind of show the younger generation that you could do capitalism consciously with integrity, make a lot of money and still not kind of break your values. So it's a long-winded answer, but there you go.
I really love that when you got into values, because that was a huge issue for myself for a long time. That my parents were both in social jobs, and I chose to be first a poker player, then a trader, completely the opposite route, maximum capitalism, and I had long time issues with those values. Had to work a lot on myself. So when a client comes to you with an issue like that, or let's stay with the values. How do you work with him to get over that hump?
I have to tell you, I think this is one of the least looked at complexities that traders don't realize stop them sometimes. Because if you are coming, especially from parents or a household or grandparents who had to really come up like blue collar workers or miners, or construction workers, those blue collar jobs, your whole body was sacrificed with hard work, that I think there can be a bit of a disconnect or a feeling almost of betrayal to your heritage if you go into a place where the hard work looks very different than the physicality of those kind of labor jobs. And our relationship to money gets imprinted upon us based on what our parents' relationship to money was. And there are traders that I have worked with specifically about their relationship to money to get it cleaned up, because there can be this sort of ceiling, invisible ceiling on traders where it's almost like they feel wrong or bad. It can be subtle, it can be unconscious, and sometimes it's not unconscious. I think this is important to say as well. This happens in every industry. If we come from we're tribal beings. We know that to work in the tribe we come from, there's going to be similarities. So for especially young men who have a collection of friends they went to college with or university with, and then if they start to do very well, it can almost feel like those friends start to hold them at a distance because they may not know how to be with their new friends' financial success. So that feeling of isolation can happen to traders. They don't want to look like they're bragging, but then they can't fully self-express themselves. And very few people outside of trading can appreciate the highs and the lows. So it becomes a further isolation, and also a feeling of hopefully this never gets said to them, but if their friends or tribe who haven't, started to change financially will sort of be like, well, who do you think you are? You think you're better than us? And even if it's not said so directly, it can be implied. And so the relationship we have to money, to class, to abundance, to scarcity, gets passed down generationally. David Wolynn has a beautiful book called It Didn't Start With You. Each of us are the products of many generations. And so I would advocate for every trader, have you been with your relationship to money? What is your temperature set point? Because if you haven't reconciled with that, you are going to, if you start to make quote unquote too much money, you will suddenly find yourself having losses that are inexplicable. And if you get too, you will suddenly find that you're having success. Harv Eker taught me about that temperature set point. One of his books is called The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And he said that temperature set point, just like an air conditioner or a heating system, is preset unless we consciously do some work around what that relationship to money is.
The thing about the relationship with money is that I read so many books about it. There's this Japanese guy, the Japanese Warren Buffett, and there's Morgan Housel, Psychology of Money. They all go very much into the details about how you should treat money, or how you should treat your relationship with money. But then when it really gets into the nitty-gritty, like for example, I always tell our traders, so when you have a losing trade, it should hurt a little bit. But when you have a winning trade, it should feel really good. At least that's how I treat it myself, for example. Would you agree with that statement? Or would you say...
I think it gets tricky, and I don't know if there's a carte blanche answer for everyone. I think it has to be, each trader has to look at themselves as unique based on what they're coming from and what their goals are for that future. So I was very fortunate yesterday to have Greg Shabika on, and he's a very successful trader, and he spoke in such a brilliant way about how competition sometimes can make a trader go for gold in ways that they previously would not have gone. And so again, this is about the individual trader. That's why I'm always saying to traders, know thyself. Become self-aware. Do you get triggered? Are you a good tipper? There's so many ways to look at your relationship to money. Where are those places where you feel like, ooh, that is something for you to take a good look at now and to find out, is there healing you need to do over the wound with money? Just like, for example, my first tricked out custom made bike when I was 14 years old got stolen. It got stolen on me within days of getting it. And that was an imprint because, of course, when this very expensive bike my parents gave me got stolen, I guess I thought I was going to get it replaced. But what got replaced was a piece of garbage bike, right? They couldn't afford to go get a Fuji tricked out again. So that was my first encounter with the concept of money doesn't grow on trees, right? That was their phrase. So but I had to do some work around that to be able to see that experience doesn't necessarily have to be the continued experience that I have with money. And they too both came from a working class kind of background. So I feel, and because I have worked with billionaires, I worked for a billionaire before I left the finance world, I could see all the places where people who maybe, by general standards are considered wealthy, they didn't think they were wealthy because they were comparing themselves to people who are at a much higher level. So it was sort of a fascinating study to just see how this is such a unique world to investigate and to realize. But I can tell you a couple of books that I know what you're saying. Those kind of books, they kind of are taking it from a bit of a higher level. I like to get into the like blood and guts of it all. So the couple of books that really changed my relationship to money, and I've read over 50, if not 100 books on money, is some obscure books, but I'm going to mention it because this book was game-changing for me. Money is Love by Barbara Wilder. That book was a complete paradigm shift for me and my relationship to it.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I never heard of that book. I'll get it tonight.
Okay, good. Good.
Sounds
It's
fantastic.
obscure. It's obscure. I don't think it's available on Kindle. It's, quite,
Not even.
quite
Okay.
old. Yeah, I don't think so. But there's other ones too. The Soul of Money by Lynne Twist. It's Not Your Money by Tosha Silver. Some of these are very spiritual books, very kind of woo-woo. But I am a reader and I read everything because I just feel everybody has pieces of the truth. I just like to expose myself. And I'm a very spiritual person. I have had my own dance with money many times. And yeah, I think it's good for traders to do that due diligence. Look at your relationship to money. Where do you get triggered? Where do you feel abundance? What are the things in place when you have felt abundance? When do you feel scarce? And because a lot of that sometimes a trader will bring into their trading even when it's not there. They'll project it. So the question is, what is wealth for you? And a lot of times I think we discount the things that make us feel wealthy that have nothing to do with what the bank account says.
Absolutely agree. Yes. That's really cool insight.
You talked about, or you said that it's made up, and I really want to go there because do you think that self-talk, we can tell ourselves through our self-talk, or we can talk ourselves into situations or into state of minds where we are more positive? How do traders can then use that in their trading to put them in a better place?
I think we have to, for the most part, all of us have to be careful with self-talk because in my own personal journey of development, I had self-talk when I first, experienced my own coaching. That was an inner critic. That was self-talk that was destructive, that was limiting, that kept me on a tight leash. And so I think the key is first identify if the self-talk that you are, potentially going to listen to makes you feel bad about yourself. I'm not talking about hard truths. Yes, we're going to, as we develop and become more self-aware, yes, we're going to have to be honest with ourselves. But we don't have to be cruel. We don't have to shame ourselves. We don't have to make ourselves feel like garbage. And yet I experience in the traders that I've worked with over the years, many of them have this really abusive self-talk, and it holds them back because whenever any of us are being spoken to in a derogatory manner, externally or internally, that is going to put us into a contraction. It's going to have us shrink. It's going to have us our breath is going to get shorter. We're going to feel shame. We're going to start to shrink. That does not facilitate a flow state. It doesn't facilitate oxygen intake, for God's sakes. So I would say get clear on, are you listening to an inner critic? Are you listening to an inner voice that makes you feel ashamed or less than? First. After that, I think then, yes, there is an inner voice. I will sometimes call that the capital E ego, right? Not the lowercase e ego, that is just, kind of petty. But the capital E ego, if you will, is our true self, our higher self, perhaps our soul self. And that is the part of us that can sort of say, you have more in the tank today. You got to bring more of it to the table. It'll put these challenges in front of us that are calling the best part of ourselves forth. And that is, I do believe, a bit of an art form, but it can be developed. And I think if we're fortunate to have colleagues, friends that are able to see that place within us, that can teach us how to practice that voice within ourselves. If you come from perhaps a family of origin where you did not receive that kind of like tough love, but an encouragement underneath it, I think it's hard for you to come up with it on your own. I think we need, to have connection with somebody who does love and encourage us, to teach us what that voice sounds like. Unfortunately, not everybody got to have that when they were young. And so I think it's hard to, mimic that if you've never really experienced it.
Yeah, makes sense. We see it a lot in the journals that we review with Edgewonk. A lot of traders are really hard on themselves. Of course, there's a truth in there that their trading is not where they want it to be, but the way that they express it is not helpful. Let's put it that way. So, reviewing your journal and writing, or first of all, writing out your thoughts, probably the way I see it could help. But then you need someone to look over it to see what is going on there, because people, they often don't see themselves, I guess, that they're overly negative and
Yep.
not really constructive in what they write. So that's
Yep.
that's a really good point. Yeah.
I think the culture, especially let's be honest, is mostly a male, field. And men are notoriously, hard on themselves and shame themselves because most of the culture that, I don't know a culture that doesn't make men feel their sense of value isn't attached to what they produce. So when you have a culture constantly hammering you with you are only valuable if you produce, well, then you're going to intuitively feel shame if you haven't produced. But, the culture is incorrect. And a trader who starts to mature and develop themselves has to see that that's bullshit. My value isn't based on what I earn. It's based on my soul. It's based on how I treat people and this planet. Yes, one has to make a living, but one can't earn you can't earn your worth. It's a birthright.
Oh, that's powerful. That's really powerful. So when a trader has these emotions, because I saw on your Instagram that you are also big about journaling, obviously. So how do you work with a trader who, for example, has these harsh self-talks? Should they journal everything they feel before their trading day, maybe during the trading day, after? How would you tell them to journal their emotions?
I think journaling can be a double-edged sword because, again, if that inner critic has kind of hijacked the microphone in their head, you don't want to be just taking notes from your inner critic and letting it all be, focused on that. So, the first book I pretty much am recommending to almost every trader is a book from Rick Carson called Taming Your Gremlin. And it specifically helps one get clear on what is me and what is that monster of the mind, as Rick calls it. And that distinction then starts to, it's his favorite catchphrase is simply notice. You start out with an index card and just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like you'd be listening to it all day long. But that makes you become so present to, my God, I am listening to this son of a gun all day long. That at least gives you some space between, being unclear where the distinction between your voice and its voice is. That is a great start. Then one can start to consider journaling. But we have to get clear what that inner critic or inner saboteur, so to speak, is saying first. Who's saying what, so that the journal is truly the trader. But one of the most critical pieces I think traders could do before they trade is I offer them a list. It's called a universal needs list. This list was created by a teacher of mine, Marshall Rosenberg. His language is called nonviolent communication, and he put together a universal needs list. So what's a need? Need is different than a want, right? So respect is a need. Connection is a need. Community is a need. Security is a need. What I see often happen for traders is that they will come into the market with unmet needs and attempt to get those needs met in their trading. And it's when it gets costly because the market is not there to meet their needs. And so what I will say to traders is be with your needs list in the morning. If you had a fight with your wife, if you had a kid who's 13 talking lip to you, giving you a hard time, you might be like just really needing respect that day. And you're just like, I'm gonna make this trade work because damn it, nobody respects me. Now, nobody's consciously thinking that, but it is driving their bus, so to speak, in the midst of the day. I told the story before, but there was one trader during COVID. She was a veteran. She'd been at least at this for a decade. She was a weekend warrior. So she came to the conversation saying, I'm taking so much risk in my trades. I don't know why I'm doing this. I never do this. Well, long story short, her adventure, that's a need, excitement, adventure, challenge, she wasn't getting met. All the places she went to on the weekends were closed. So now she was invisibly trying to get her need for that excitement and adventure in her trading. Once she saw it, she was able to resist the temptation. But we have to see it. It has to be brought into the light.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
That's amazing because most people would just say, when you take too much risk, you're being greedy, and they slap those labels onto people. But I always found, because we do a lot of reviews of the journals and traders put those labels in their trades, but I often find it's not even helpful, but it's not pointing to the right problem that there is. So how do you get there to the next level beyond that greed label? Is there a way?
I think you want to become very conscious of the words that you're using, not just internally, but what you're listening to, who you're listening to, who are surrounding you. What is their stuff? Are they aware of their own limiting beliefs? Are they wounded in some way and not having reconciled with some of those wounds? Because the majority of people are wounded, and the majority of people haven't done work on their wounds. And then they're going to give you advice, and how much work have you done on the things that you have been hurt by? And if you can start to be conscious of that, then you can start to become somebody who becomes in tune to yourself. Oh, you know what? It seems like I always get triggered on these kinds of trades. Wow, what could be happening for me? Now, this is something I'll ask of every client when I work with them. Please bring neutrality and curiosity for the ride. Why those two? Because if you approach your trading from a place of curiosity, now you're not coming in with judgment, right? Which is that label you just spoke about. So the key is, how do you begin to put all these labels and judgments down and actually start to walk around your trading like it's a piece of sculpture? Like, what does it look like from this angle? What does it look like from that angle? If you're like a private detective or Columbo, which was my favorite one as a kid, now you're just curious. And in that curiosity, you may discover, it's actually my need for excitement. I work with, a lot of traders are geniuses. And do you know what happens? They're bored in their trading. And so where do they screw up? They screw up because they need a challenge. And their trading is making them money, but guess what? It's not giving them a challenge. It's not giving them a puzzle to solve. And so I'm like, dude, get a side hustle, get a Rubik's Cube, start playing chess with four guys in the middle of the day because your thing could be making all your money. But then you feel bored because you're so damn smart and strategic that you will make complexities that don't even exist just so that you don't feel bored.
That's amazing. Yeah. Really good advice. Yeah, the boredom, we see a lot of different things in Edgewonk. People have problems with different kind of things in their trading. But surprisingly, when you break it down, it's like 4 or 5 main components that traders struggle with. I think the biggest one is not letting their winners run long enough or just taking random trades. I think if traders could avoid those, we would see a lot more profitable ones. I'm curious, when you work with traders, do you see that traders are very individual or do they struggle with the same things? How do you see that?
They seem to struggle, I think, with the same things, but the uniqueness is the reasons that inform that struggle that are different.
Right. So then how do you get to know why traders do the same issues but for different reasons? How do you get there? Because that's where we are currently as well.
Yeah. Well, I have an assessment that I use. I call it Trader Positioning Index, which is a true X-ray of their soul. It is the most extraordinary assessment that I've ever seen. And I was introduced to it about 5 years ago. And what that does is it allows me and the trader to see under the hood and identify where and what is kind of their operating system. And by being able to see that, we both are clear what needs to be focused on in the coaching, because each of us are coming with an operating system based on our life experience. And the key is, that operating system served us once. It really did. It protected us. We were so incredibly adaptable, because every child is, that you figure out how to navigate whatever that younger family of origin was that you had to navigate. But what was needed then likely is very different than what's needed now. And so we have to update our phones freaking like almost every month, right? Because the operating system has been up-leveled. When was the last time we up-leveled ourselves or upgraded ourselves? That is what I am trying to hopefully advocate. Don't see it as something's wrong with you. You just need an upgrade to your operating system. That's all.
So when we talk about operating systems, so I'm starting to make a picture of your process. So basically, first people need to do this trader positioning index to get to know themselves, basically. Then they need to work with their inner critic, make sure it doesn't dump on them all day long. Then they need to get their needs met, is what you said, outside of trading.
And Maria, let me say this. We don't always get our needs met, right? Just by knowing about them, we don't necessarily get them met. But this is what's so fascinating about that work. Even if we don't get our needs met fully, there are certain feelings that happen when needs are not met. Here are some of them: anger, apathy, frustration, sadness, grief, rage. These are just human feelings, but those will get kicked up if needs aren't met and or not met for a long period of time. So those feelings are flags on the dashboard of us to indicate to us, just like your gas tank tells us when it's low, hey, you might not have a few of your needs met right now. That's why you're feeling angry. That's why you're feeling frustrated. Tend to those. So let's say you come into your trading day and you can't get anything met. But now you're like, you know what? I know that I'm going to be trading today apathetically, angry, sad, by just having yourself see that that's what's missing, you have just kind of shifted and given yourself some compassion and acknowledgement that those needs haven't been met. And that, again, allows you to see, yeah, if I take this trait, this is me just being pissed off.
And that's where then self-sabotage, people throw the term self-sabotage out there when they do something they know they shouldn't be doing.
But I don't think most self-sabotage is conscious. I think it's invisible. And that is why it can be so maddening, because you're just like, I'm trying so hard. But there is another part of you that is deeper. I mean, we think we're running the show, but we're not. It's that, it's that old lizard brain that's running the show. And what does it want? It wants us to stay safe. It is trying to protect us. But what protects us on the Serengeti thousands of years ago is not the same thing as what's going to protect a trader. But traders are like, oh, I can just, push through it. You're talking about the very thing that got us to the top of the food chain. You can't grind through that, guy. You can't grind through that. This is how we are still here. So the key is you've got to realize, if you're putting your body every day, multiple times a day, into an experience that it's going to consider as a threat, you're going to have to do some work internally to not have your system override you to try to keep you safe. You've got to work with the system you have, not kid yourself that, you can be a robot, because unless you're from another planet, you're human. And that means you're fallible, and you are going to have your system operate a certain way, because it's how we're all built.
Mm-hmm. If a trader hasn't done that work for a long time, definitely there will be maybe some trauma, or I think you call it energy, trapped survival energy, for example, stuck in their system.
Yep.
And that just builds up over time, right?
Correct.
And then that just leads to more detrimental behavior, more trauma on top, etc. How do we break out of that cycle? How do we release those trapped energies? Because that's a big one, I think.
It is. It's huge. And this is part of why my practice includes teaching somatic processing. The body, here's the thing about unprocessed feelings. They stay in the body. And you can't, and this is part of what I see a lot of traders do, especially because they're smart, right? They're intellectual, they're up in their head. They want to think their way out of their feelings. You can't. You can only feel your way out of your feelings. And to feel is sometimes a very frightening thing to ask somebody when they have spent their life cutting themselves off from those very feelings because they weren't safe when they were kids to feel. So those who have a tendency to be up in their head, me included, understand how just letting my focus leave my head and drop into my body, that took me years, probably still years, 20, I've been in therapy and coaching and everything for so long, but that was the game changer for me. This all thanks to Raphael Kushner, who specifically teaches this somatic processing, taught it to me, and Peter Levine. And Peter Levine's book is called Waking the Tiger. And you know it. I'm so glad that you do.
Yes.
His book is the first construct from me when I read it 3 years ago, that this trapped energy has to be discharged. And learning how to be with that, and Raphael Kushner's work, he's got countless books, but the one I'm going to speak to now is called The One Thing Holding You Back. And that book specifically, he gives you a step-by-step process, which I do with my clients now, to have them start to be and feel that very feeling. Now, there are times when there are specific feelings that will be really hard to feel. And so what do? You just feel as much as it as you can. Maybe it's a second, maybe it's 5 seconds. Ravila has a great quote that says, you go as fast as the slowest part of you can go. And you don't put yourself on tilt. You don't do a grind it out. I'm going to feel these feelings all the way through. No, you're going to tilt out. You have to learn to teach your body and your nervous system and the regulation that it's actually safe to feel. You are now going to provide a safe forum for those feelings to come up. But that takes some time. And I do think it's a little tricky to do by ourselves initially. I could not do it by myself when I first got introduced to it. But that somatic processing, at least for my own personal journey, it was life-changing. And I have been using that in my coaching ever since, because it is definitely the one foundational piece any trader that comes into me almost has never learned. And it costs you guys. It costs you if you don't learn how to feel.
Does that work also have to do with the vagus nerve, for example? Is that
Yes, it does.
okay?
Yep. The vagus nerve,
Interesting.
learning how to navigate that. I think now more than ever, Pesaventical, Gabor Mate, the gentleman who wrote It Didn't Start With You, or Wolynn, all of these teachers, like, they're finally being listened to. Nervous system regulation, like, it's dysregulation that most traders are in. But they're not just dysregulated from the market. They think it's the market. They came in dysregulated, and then the market dysregulates them further. The key is being in tune to the fact that you do have a central nervous system. And this is what we have to start to become friends with and begin to have some empathy for. And just, is it okay to just say this one thing? Because I just had to tell a trader this the other day. If you have complex trauma, if you come from any kind of real challenging childhood, cold plunges aren't for you. I have done cold plunges. I'm not against them. I think it's an incredible, technique, but it's not for everybody. And for those who have complex trauma, it can be re-triggering all over again, because their whole system is in a constant state of hypervigilance, that when you go into cold water, it can kind of shock the system. There are those who need to start with just warm baths so that their system can start to come down a little bit. So I just throw that out there, because a lot of traders now are like, Kim, I did the cold baths and that didn't work. I'm like, it's not, this is not a one size fits all with all the stuff that's out there now.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot tell you how much I agree, because I had some episodes where my nervous system was completely dysregulated with all the fantastic side effects, and cold plunges was not it. It was not great.
No.
In that state. It was actually very counterproductive. So
yep,
yeah,
it
I
is
agree.
very counterproductive, exactly. And I'm sorry that happened, and I'm sorry that you tried that in the midst of what you were already trying to get your poor system back to center.
Yeah.
It's just, and look, it's great that we're talking in these conversations today about cold plunges at all, or, infrared, or things are moving in the right direction, but there's still some confusion, and there's a little bit less empathy being given to oneself. And I would like each trader to just be better at approaching whatever they want different within themselves with a lot more love, a lot more compassion, a lot more empathy. Because I promise you, if you lay that upon yourself, your ability to transcend the things that are holding you back, you will move so much quicker than beating yourself up and, being mean or abusive to yourself.
Yeah, we actually we went to a seminar in 2018 of the late Van Tharp. You're probably familiar with his work. and in that seminar, Peak Performance 101, the first time I heard that concept of you need to trade from a place of compassion and self-love, and that triggered something in me which was really powerful. So that's for anyone who hears that and is not into spirituality, don't just ignore that advice. It's really powerful.
No, because it is, and I say this all the time about the market. If traders could start to see that the market, they see it as it's happening to me. Look what it did to me. I say, look at the market as this is what it's doing for you. It's trying to help you see the places you limit yourself. It's trying to show you your triggers. It's actually trying to up-level you and make you more conscious of the places that you haven't healed. Instead of seeing it as the enemy, see it as your personal Yoda who's actually trying to have you shed the ego, shed the limiting beliefs, shed the mis stories that are made up that you heard maybe when you were a kid, and let the market try to teach you instead of resisting it. Like, oh yeah, shoot, it just taught me again that I really don't like to lose. Like, let that be, I guess I'm really attached to being right. Instead of seeing it as the enemy, it's just, what if the market's happening for you and not to you? It's a very different paradigm.
Totally. And then you start thinking differently about your trading completely, more from a creative point of view rather than I have to make money today point of view. And that
Totally.
just shifts everything. Yeah.
For sure, because I have to make money today is coming from scarcity, and it's got the energy of have to, must, should. When has that ever gone well? I have a picture saved on my phone. I don't remember if you guys remember this picture. It was this man working at a computer with the North Korean dictator looking over his shoulder. And I always lift that picture up and I say, do you think this man is right now working at his best? As this North Korean dictator looks over his shoulder, and everybody's like, oh my God, no, oh my God. I was like, but you currently have that dictator inside of your own head looking over you. Do you think that means you're bringing your best game when that's the case? And again, I'm not talking about not being honest with yourself or not challenging yourself or giving yourself hard truths, but cruel, abusive, it's not going to help anybody.
Yes. On your Instagram, you had a post that intrigued me. It was about getting into flow and staying there to trade from a place of success, calm, peace, for a trader that has, for example, been a couple of years trading from chaos, and that chaos feels now very familiar to him. So actually trading from a place of peace feels very unfamiliar to him. So he keeps getting pulled back into the chaos. How can we stay in that flow state of peace and calm?
Such a great question. Again, it's probably going to be unique for each of us, but I'll tell you, recognizing that you seem to feel at home in chaos is a great first step. And this is why I say how you do one thing is how you do everything. What does your home look like? What does your trading desk look like? What do your relationships look like? Do you have chaos in your life? Do you have chaos in your desk? Do you have chaos on your laptop? Like, all of these are pieces. Like, if yes, then that chaos is where you have found something familiar, possibly. There's a great saying that says, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. So if chaos is what you've grown up with, and chaos is, and you could kind of get a little bit of a dopamine hit. Look at me, I just walked through fire. It's kind of like, oh, look at what I accomplished in the midst of that chaos. But that's why it's so important to just keep noticing, oh, do I keep that going? Because that's what feels familiar. And again, you don't want to like pivot the cruise ship on a dime, but you want to start to be honest with yourself. Is that what is actually necessary? Or is that just become a bit of a security blanket? And the same could be said for the traders who have to have all their ducks in a row. They don't want any chaos. They don't want anything to go unexpected. I have to know everything first. It's the polar opposite, but it's the same thing. So look for your polarities. Look for the places where it has to, it must, because on the other side of that, the pendulum could go all the way over. Just notice where these things that you are so used to show up. And that begins, again, that process of self-awareness. Simply notice. Again, Rick Carson's great phrase, just simply notice. Start to pay attention to those details.
There's a German dude right now on YouTube. He's blowing up a bit. He says psychology in trading is absolutely not important because it's just a process that you learn and then you follow it. But then I look at this guy outside of trading, and he's in his 40s. He's in incredible shape. Yeah, so I can tell from his demeanor that he is an incredibly disciplined person outside of trading, and he brought that into trading. That's why he says psychology is not an issue, because he already had that mindset, which I found fascinating, because for him it obviously makes sense. For everyone else who is not like him, which is the majority, I would say, they were like, what the hell are you talking about?
Right. But I think there's a lot of people who would agree with him that don't feel that the focus on the psychology or the emotional side of a trader is relevant. And I really don't try to disagree with them, because everybody's entitled to their opinion. And I know that humans are emotional beings. And if we are coming from a place where we have, again, perhaps disconnected ourselves from our emotions, from our feelings, we don't want to be with them. That makes me think, I wonder what might be difficult for that person to feel, because the feeling is happening whether we're conscious of it or not. And, Gabor Mate talks about this a lot. The feeling will out itself. And if we don't let those emotions be felt, then the body is going to have the cost. And that's another great book, The Body Keeps the Score, right? And it does. And it may not show up for many, 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 many years, but in my experience, the body will have the final say. And so I'm just interested in trying to be in harmony with my body and try to allow what I can emotionally stretch myself into, so that my body, if it's keeping score, is going to be hopefully on the winning side with me, because I don't want that cost to come later.
Yeah, my doctor, he called it the biological break. Eventually, when I went to him with my symptoms, he said, "Yeah, it's a
Good
biological
for
break."
him that he even acknowledged that, because very few do. So good for you that you got yourself a good one. But
Yes.
that is just, it's, I think, beginning to start to be paid attention to, but not paid attention to nearly enough. Gabor Mate's most recent book is called The Myth of Normal. And it is a profound book at how just so many different approaches of the medical system is completely ignoring what a person has gone through. I don't know if you've ever heard of the ACE test. The ACE test is a questionnaire about, like, did you grow up with an alcoholic parent? Was there divorce? Lots of little questions like that. And the score of that ACE test, you will see those who have those higher scores are much, much, much higher risk for heart attacks, for all different kinds of health complications later. So that is science. This is not like, oh, they're just, talking pie in the sky. No, this is science. You listen to Chase Hughes, the, expert on brainwashing. Like, he talks all the time about this system of ours. A lot of times people are just not as connected to how this system really works. And Peter Levine in Waking the Tiger, he talks about how he got hit by a car crossing the street, and his hand was in the middle of, because there was peripheral vision. He didn't consciously see the car, but yet there was and his hand was already attempting to protect him from that incoming car. And so because he got hit before the hand, finished its revolution, if you will, he had two people approach him in this, on the ground trying to help him. And one person kept trying to hold his arm down. And luckily, another person was there and said, let his arm be. His arm, he said, if it had been held down, he would have had an injury to it because it was finishing its cycle. And it needed to complete it so that trapped energy wouldn't be stuck in there. And that is what, I guess I want to say to the traders listening. Is it possible you have trapped energy, even just from a trade that went really bad, that you haven't felt yet, and now it's haunting you? It's a chain, a shadow that keeps coming back. Perhaps if you are able to truly feel the grief, anger, rage, disappointment, you get to be free once and for all of it. But that's, it takes courage, it takes vulnerability to potentially feel those feelings. And, our cultures all haven't really advocated or taught us how to do that so well.
Yeah, especially in trading, no one or almost no one talks about their struggles because maybe they feel shame about their drawdown, or it's not very common, especially in this industry. Or in any, I would say, high-performing industry.
I would agree. I would agree. It is shame. And the shame is the biggest enemy a trader has, is that shame. And being able to learn how to take a sense of compassion. It's not our fault that we feel shame, but it's our responsibility to transmute it and turn it around. And that means we're going to have to love our fallible self. We're going to have to learn how to love ourselves with all our crooked limbs and branches, because if we don't, then we're going to be fighting our whole lives. The whole time you're trading, the whole time you're living in relationship, you're going to be in a fight against the very thing you are, which is a fallible human. It's a lot of resistance to live that way. And because you mentioned that flow book, isn't it more appealing to live in a flow state as opposed to in resistance to everything? I mean, it just sounds a little more pleasant to me.
Just a tiny bit. I have one last question for you, which might be a bit controversial because it's about system hopping. But have you ever worked with a client and after working with them for, I don't know, 5-6 sessions, you told them the way you're trading right now absolutely does not work for you. You need a different approach. Have you ever had that situation?
I have not, because it would not be my place to say that. Coaching, at least the kind of coach that I am, I receive my clients as naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. WHOLE. They're not broken. They don't need fixing. I'm not the expert. They are. So a client is the person who would need to see that for themselves. Because what do I know? Really, what does anybody know?
True.
That person has to get curious to the point where they may say to themselves, this may not serve me anymore. But that is the client's responsibility. And that's why I think, it's I have 5 practices. They are spoken about in my book, Transforming Wall Street. One of the first practices, self-responsibility. We have to be willing to take 100% responsibility for what our life looks like, what it's showing up, what repeatedly keeps happening. It's not a coincidence. And if you begin to get curious enough, you will potentially move the pieces on the board. So I wouldn't be saying that to them, but I would potentially say to them, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and keep getting the same results, you can't get mad about that. You got to get curious. What would be the reason you're so attached to that particular, and what is causing that attachment? Get curious about that.
Great answer. Great answer. Absolutely. In the end, you have to find the answer for yourself most of the time, so you believe it anyway.
Exactly. And I truly feel if we can get rid of the mud that is covering us, the inner critic, the inner saboteur, the lack of self-compassion, the healing. Like there's a beautiful, story about that golden Buddha who gets covered up when, an enemy army rocks into town. They cover the golden Buddha with all this mud so that they don't see that this gorgeous thing is there. That's all of us. Life kind of covers us up with all this mud. And we forget there were these gorgeous little golden beings underneath. So we have to have somebody sometimes come along and throw some water on us and start chipping it away so that we can come back to this incredible creature that each of us are.
That was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Kim. It was that 1 hour went by so fast. Amazing.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. And I will link all the resources, all the books, videos that you mentioned, your channels, everything will be linked underneath the video so people can check out more. I look really forward to diving into a lot of those things that you mentioned. So yeah, thank you for being here with us today. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you for such beautiful, deep questions. I am very grateful that you allowed me to wax on so, abundantly, but they were such good questions. Thank you.
Great answers. Thank you.
All right. That was
Alrighty. Perfect.
time.